Every Mother Has a Different Story by Cheryl Strayed. Every mother has a different story, though we tend to group them together. We like to think that partnered moms have it good and single moms have it rough, but the truth is that they're a diverse bunch. Some single mothers have lots of child-free time because their kids are regularly in the custody of their fathers. Some seldom get a break. Some partnered mothers split childcare duties with their spouses in egalitarian ways. Others might as well be alone. Some mothers of both varieties have parents, siblings, and friends who play active roles in their children's lives in ways that significantly lighten the load. Others have to pay for every hour another person looks after their kids. Some mothers, single or partnered, can't afford to pay anyone for anything. Some can and do. Others can and won't. Some are aided financially by parents or trust funds or inheritances. Others are entirely on their own. The reality is that, regardless of the circumstances, most moms are alternately blissed out by their love for their children and utterly overwhelmed by the spectacular amount of sacrifice they require.
Thank you, Kat. This is What to Tell the Children by Rachel Kann. Tell them that this is the great awakening. Tell them that we humans have made some big mistakes, and that's how we find ourselves in this tenuous place. Tell them that hate is the poison. Tell them love is the remedy. That it's better to be readied for what comes next, even if the revelation is painful. Tell them this is the paradigm shift, that the old is collapsing in on itself, that this death rattle is simply a temper tantrum, the last gasp of a dying Goliath. Remind them of how they get wild when they are the most tired, and then pass out. That this is what it's about, that this is what's happening to a decrepit and ineffective empire. Tell them that everything is not okay, and knowing that is okay. Tell them that pretending that what is unacceptable is fine is what got us to this sick and dysfunctional spot on the timeline. Apologize for any prior attempts to teach them denial. Tell them you were blinded by desire for comfortable numbness. Express that you had the best of intentions, that you were working within a broken system where benefited the few at the expense of the many. That you laid low, kept to the status quo, obediently played your role, but those days are over because now you know better. Tell them they have no responsibility to follow someone blindly based solely on a title. Teach them to practice discernment. Tell them authority and respect must be earned and are not inherently deserved. Tell them they are good people and bad people from every background, ethnicity, and belief system, that they must align themselves with kindness, that there is no more time for divisiveness. You tell them that just because something's legal doesn't mean it's right. You tell them to stand up and fight. Remind them of all the lawful atrocities committed in this sick and twisted history of a violent country, that Rosa Parks righteously broke a law and the world took notice, that Harriet Tubman is a modern-day Moses, that women would not be allowed to vote and no one would be proposed, that woman would not be allowed to vote and no one would have proposed another notion if the blessed rebels hadn't taken a stand. Tell them love will win this war, but only if we remember that love's not just one unending cuddle puddle, but fierce as a mother bear protecting her cubs. Tell them that although this existence is damaged beyond repair, they must not despair. There is possibility, and we will willingly and willfully open ourselves to new ways of being, because the old way is not working, has never worked, and the world deserves better. And we are worth it. Tell them they are not free while another suffers under enslavement. Teach them that we're all limbs on one body and we cannot chop off one arm without deep suffering. Teach them humility, but also to relearn to trust their intuition and beg their forgiveness for unintentionally misleading them previously. Tell them their gifts are useful. Tell them they are beautiful. Tell them they are the truth. So a few moments ago, we heard Kat reading Cheryl Strayed, who wrote, "The reality is that regardless of the circumstances, most moms are alternately blissed out by the love for their children and utterly overwhelmed by the spectacular amount of sacrifice they require. We are both blissed out and overwhelmed by our circumstance. The act of mothering by people of any sex or gender identity elicits strong emotions in many directions. It is also the case that it can be intense to be a child in relationship with mothers and those who mother us. We hear a lot about the deep love that is often present. There's satisfaction and comfort and joy, and I lift those up and celebrate them. And there can also be anger and pain and shame, as we have heard numerous times this morning. Today, I want to feel all of those emotions. Mother's Day is a holiday which produces emotions like almost no other day. All of these feelings are valid. And I don't just want to talk about them, I want to feel them. I invite you to feel them too, if you are in a space where that feels safe to do so. I want to feel those feelings with you, and I want to hug you with all of this. I don't know all of your stories, of course. I don't know all of my sister's stories, and I've been there her entire life. I don't know all the stories of my mother's life. I do know many of the complications, the griefs and the joys, the struggles, the sacrifices, the triumphs. I don't know all of the stories of the people in this room and the people online. I know some of them, and I know that you're human, and I know that we humans have complicated relationships with our mothers and with our children and the concept of motherhood in general. And I feel, if I stared around this room long enough, if I stared at the names and the pictures on the screen long enough, I could stand here and weep and bawl with the immense suffering that so many of us have experienced around these topics. Were I to allow it, my tears would flow from the exultation of love and from the immense suffering that is in this room. Laughter would bubble up, sighs heaved, angry words would be hurled, along with sounds of disappointment, horror, envy, and there'd be some head shaking and grudging respect. And in some of us, at least, all of these emotions would be present. Feels overwhelming to be human. And I think that's appropriate. We are right to be having the feelings we are having. This makes us human, these feelings. And know that I'm hugging you in all of this. So, at some point in a pregnancy, a body cares for a body. regardless of what else happens later, for a bit, one body serves as shelter and sustenance for another. Our first experience of love is in a womb. We are housed and nourished by another. That love may later be withdrawn or tarnished or rejected. It may also be amplified and deepened in spite of, instead of, or in addition to all those other potential emotional complications. I've heard a tale of an incarnation of the Buddha which weeps ceaselessly. All day, every day, tears of compassion just pour down its face from the love and disappointment and rage and sorrow at the suffering that we humans continue to embrace and inflict on each other. I would like to believe there's also a gender-neutral avatar who feels all the complicated emotions of mothering and relationships with offspring. I want something to whom we can go and pour out our emotions and feel safely held and understood. I need something which can withstand the tremendous power of these emotions and still stand steadfast, supporting me and those who come to seek this love. Wouldn't that be grand? And if these relationships with mothers and mothering are so fraught, if they are as intense as we know them to be, then do we not have a responsibility to embark upon them with intentionality and great care? Were we working in a laboratory creating something that volatile, we would take extreme precautions to safeguard it. Should we not go to some lengths so that motherhood and mothering are conscious choices with education and appropriate resourcing? Could we not at the very least ensure we don't force this intense experience upon those who are unwilling or unready? Rather, in these United States, there are places which are actively working to make it harder to prevent pregnancies and almost impossible to terminate an unwanted pregnancy, even in the case of rape and incest. I know many of us are working to turn that tide, to make reproductive rights and reproductive health care widely available and more inexpensive. I like to imagine that weeping, loving deity of motherhood would have special hugs and words of encouragement for all of us engaged in that struggle. I also like to imagine that same compassionately fierce God would have strong words for those who claim to honor motherhood and in the same breath vote for bombing mothers and children in far-off countries. If the acts of mothering are mostly about nurture and compassion, then shouldn't Mother's Day include a call for ceasefires and hostages returned and peace in general? It was just that to our Unitarian ancestor, Julia Ward Howe, the woman who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Howe issued a call for a Mother's Day of peace in 1870, a few years after the Civil War ended. That's not the full origin story of this modern holiday, but it is a reflection that motherhood can be earnestly caring, passionately protective, and politically active all at the same time. As Rachel Kann reminded us in our second reading, love will win this war, but only if we remember that love is not just one unending cuddle puddle, but love is also fierce as a mother bear protecting her cubs. Which brings us back to those intense emotions flexing in our overwhelmed hearts this day and every day. With all the struggles and suffering, acknowledging the imperfections of these relationships, let us also reflect on the positive experiences we want to honor in our own lives and that we want to offer as a model to our descendants so that they experience more love, more joy, more support going forward. Thinking of the names that we called earlier in the service, thinking of the names remaining in our hearts, the people who helped mother us. the people who companioned us into the people we are today. Let us be grateful for the ways we've experienced nurture and care. May the love that we have experienced, the love that we have given however we are able, and our gratitude for these relationships fill our hearts and give us encouragement for the days ahead. So may we be. And happy Mother's Day.